I'm a huge fan of what Genesis is doing with their entire lineup right now, even the dedicated EVs. I'm gonna show you the GV60, which was built from the ground up to be an EV, and compare it to what they did with the electrified G80, which has the same proportions and the same styling as the gas G80, but it comes with some compromises by doing that, which I'm in favor of still. So we're gonna compare the G80, the electric one, to the internal combustion one from a front, side, rear, and also talk about the gorgeous interiors that could teach Mercedes and BMW a few things about how to create stunning, passionate, artistic interiors that we have in the in pretty much all Genesis. Maybe not the GV60, but we're gonna have a look at that in a bit. So let's talk about some of the spec and tech of the electrified G80. You have 367 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque, which is a little less than the gas-powered version's 375 horsepower and 391 pound-feet of torque. The torque obviously goes up when you have an electric motor, and 0 to 60 in this 5,000 pound beast is done in just over 4 seconds, even though the horsepower number isn't really that impressive. You can charge this from 10 to 80% in 22 minutes, but that only happens with a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger, which is pretty much impossible to find these days. So in reality, 20 to 90 takes about 45 minutes. You have the range of 282 miles, and I know this could be a problem for some people. Thinking about the Tesla Model S, for example, which has 405 miles of range, 282 is not that impressive, and it's also a lot less than the gas-powered 3.5-liter turbo G80, which gets 367 miles on a full tank. But that's one of these compromises that you simply have to make if you're turning an already existing gas platform into an EV. You're gonna have to do some compromises like that. And it also comes only in one trim, the electric version of the G80, and it starts at an impressive $79,825, and that is $14,000 more than the gas-powered G80. That's where I start to feel like maybe I would go with the gas G80 because of the price point. Alright, so let's jump into Photoshop here and let's have a look at the differences, or if there are any, between the gas-powered G80 and compare it to the electrified G80. I love what Genesis is doing. They've really found their identity in their latest models, specifically with this two-line design, having these two lines in the front end, then go into these side lights as well, and then same lines in the same parallel lines goes into the taillight as well. I'm gonna show you that more in a side view. And then we have this big grille as well that doesn't look oversized because it feels like it fills in the proportions, and the graphics feels natural in this design. Looking at the electrified version, we still have pretty much the same layout, except looking at the lower part here is looking different in the electrified version. You also have 19-inch wheels, which are a little bit smaller than the ones we have on the gas version. And in addition, the grille, as you can see, is covered up, but we still have the exact same layout or silhouette of the grille, and everything else, the graphics and so on, is the exact same design as we have in the gas-powered version. Now, there is a European version that I just noticed that I want to show you, and I think the European version looks different by standard from the US version, especially in the lower part. So you can see right here in the lower intake looks different from what we have in the US. It looks maybe a little bit more aggressive in the US with these wings kind of ending right here. I'm not sure which one of these I prefer. I kind of like the classy lines, the foundation of the European version, having this line at the bottom. I think that looks a little better than the US version with these wings sticking up like that, but it definitely looks a lot more alike to the electric version, the European version, because we have a similar style in the lower part, as you can see. Now, looking at the side view, this is the two-line design that Genesis is really hammering into their cars right now. I also want to talk about these wheels. I've heard a lot of different opinions about these wheels, and the thing is, I hear a lot of negative opinions about these wheel designs as well, specifically these where they have these indents in the spokes. But I think this is something new, and in addition it connects to the rest of the graphics of the car, and I don't think I've ever seen that on standard wheels coming from a manufacturer, to have the same kind of style that we have in the grills now coming back in the spokes on the wheels. I think that's a very interesting approach to kind of innovate wheel design. But looking at this gorgeous side view with this beautiful shoulder line that goes kind of dips and creates this flow motion, and the same thing with the greenhouse having this nice curvature to it, doesn't really come back and create a 3-box design with a clearly defined trunk. But that's okay in this case, because it's still a gorgeous looking design. And then we have the lower part here kind of holding everything up with this line at the bottom, and of course the 2-line design that is what Genesis is really nailing with their models right now. So looking at the electrified version, the thing is, you can't really see this with your eyes, but the roof line or the greenhouse actually sits 0.2 of an inch higher than it does on the gas G80, and the reason for that is obviously that they need to raise it by just a little bit to create the battery pack in the bottom. Now, this is where another compromise comes in. When you're taking an internal combustion engine car and redesign it into a EV, you have less interior space. Even though this sits 0.2 of an inch higher, the roofline, the interior for the front passenger, for the driver, is 0.8 less headroom, and it's 0.6 for the passengers. But it's still been tested with people over 6 feet, and they still sit comfortably in the passenger, in the rear seats. And there is also, for some reason, less leg room by about 2.5 inches in the electric version, and you have less trunk space as well, simply because the battery pack takes up more space than just having the engine up here, and then you can do whatever you want in this area of the car in a gas car. Looking at the rear view of the G80, I'm a huge fan of this design. I love this ellipse shape that we have in these cars right now. We have everything kind of coming into this ellipse in the rear end, and how these taillights wrap around, going from inside of the ellipse and then stretching a little bit in to the rear fender. I think it's a beautiful looking styling from Genesis, and here you can clearly see this gorgeous shoulder line going from the front end of the grille and then dipping down and kind of fades out right in the very end before it meets this end point of the side view. Some of the differences here is obviously the main difference is in the rear, that you don't have these exhaust pipes, which I actually prefer to have them be in the shape of the grille. I think that connects with the front end and also creates a very unique design for the tailpipes. But here you also have a different transition from, for example, you see this line goes straight down and doesn't really connect with the rest of the body, but in the EV version you have the same line going right here and then going down and then connects with this trim piece. This, I think, is a beautiful transition from the rear graphics into the side graphics by having that curvature there. And then you can see where the exhaust pipes used to be, they now have the reverse lights, which in the gas version sits a little narrower. And now they just decided to, how do we cover up the tailpipes? Well, let's just move out the reverse lights a little bit to each corner, and then we have a nice symmetrical looking rear end in the EV, just like we have in the gas powered version as well. So very well done, Genesis, creating this EV, turning it from a gas-powered model into a completely electric version. It's not an easy thing to do. I can imagine the engineers going crazy how they would fit a battery pack in a car that's already been engineered to be gas-powered. Okay, now we have to talk about these interiors of Genesis. I'm a huge fan of the flow and the nice quality of the materials and the small details. It shows that Genesis interior designers, they still have a passion and an artistic touch to create their interiors, which is kind of lacking a lot today. I'm gonna show you and compare right here where the black part is. I'm gonna pop in some BMW, Teslas, and Mercedes interiors to show you just a comparison between Genesis and what they're doing with their interiors compared to other manufacturers. And the thing is, with the they did have to do some compromises here as well for the EV version. This is the EV version down here. For example, this wood piece right here is leftover pieces from furniture manufacturers, and then it was dipped in resin to create these patterns, which I think is pretty cool. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this color combination with this. I think this is like dark green or something in combination with white. I can just imagine how much cleaning I would have to do with a white interior. But the overall layout of the design is gorgeous because we have a nice house, beautifully curved house for the gauge cluster, which is all digital. And then we have this integration of the infotainment screen, which feels like it feels pretty well integrated. And the reason I'm saying that is because it still has a nice line going in here, creating a back rest for the infotainment screen. And it also sits in this kind of ditch or whatever you want to call this. So it feels like it's very well integrated in the design. This is definitely my favorite interior combination of the G80. This is the American version right here with this red, and then we have some carbon fiber texture. And just look at details like this. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about passion in interior design. Not just the beautiful flow that we have going from the doors into the gauge cluster and then kind of flowing over to the other side and creating this nice flow in the passenger side as well. Just beautifully done. But details like this little raised piece for the four ways right here, you have it kind of goes up a little bit in this trim piece, as you can see, goes from straight into a raised area, which shows to me that the designers, even from the very early stages, decided that this little button is gonna have to have a raised platform to sit on, and it's intended to be there. So it's not just placed anywhere randomly, for example, up in the ceiling up here or somewhere. It has its dedicated spot, and that's what I love about interior designs when they do this, when they take all the features and show that each feature is framed by something. It shows that it's supposed to sit there, and all the details like these wheels, for example, it feels, just look at how beautifully done this is with different textures. And if I see something like this and I feel like I want to touch it and I want to feel it, feel the texture and the clicks and everything, if I have that feeling when I sit in the interior, that means, in my opinion, that the interior is very well made. Now, comparing these interiors to, for example, we have Mercedes up to the left, BMW iX, and last but not least, the Tesla Model S. Just look at the differences in how they treat their interiors. Yes, Genesis did kind of went this route with the GV60 since it was an EV to begin with, but I don't think that was a necessary step to take. I think they still could have made something like this with the GV60, which still feels passionate and not just have it be a clinical, boring interior. Just look at how badly integrated this screen is on the dash on the iX. It even has you can even see the mounting feet going on like it just stuck it on the dash, and then you have this big landing strip right here where nothing goes on, and a very static feeling to the flow, the overall flow of the design. It's very cut off everywhere and squarish. Mercedes does this a little better by having this nice tub, which I call it. It feels like you're sitting in a tub with an iPad. That's pretty much what you're getting in the Mercedes interiors. But we have some more nice quality feel, in my opinion, comparing this to the BMW. The one that I think makes the best interiors about these three is actually the Tesla, because it feels like everything flows a lot better in the Tesla than it does in the BMW or the Mercedes, because we have some line flow going on, and the big screen actually feels a little more integrated because we have some cutout in the actual dash for it to sit in, and in addition to that we have a housing for the gauge cluster right here. As you can see, it's very simplistic, but it feels like it has more of a continuity, and it feels like all the graphic features and lines are more connected in the Tesla than it is in the specifically the BMW, but also in the Mercedes up here. I think a lot of manufacturers can take the G80 as an example of how you turn a gorgeous sedan into an EV without making it into a blob like Mercedes does with pretty much every single EV they come out with these days. And looking at these interiors as well, this is what I want to see in a 2023 interior. We don't have to strip everything down and make it feel like a low poly interior in every single EV that we make. We can still have some passion in it and create some nice flows and nice materials that you actually want to sit in and feel in. If I look at these interiors, I would definitely prefer to sit in the G80, even though it is the electric version, than any other of the Mercedes, BMW, or Tesla that I just showed you. So yes, turning an internal combustion model into an EV is gonna come with a lot of compromises, but I think the design benefit that we get from it totally outweighs those compromises.